What if I told you that the Middle Ages were not only a time of kings, castles, and chivalry, but also a world teeming with secrets, some so strange, so tangled in whispers and riddles, that even after centuries of study, we still don't know the full truth? Imagine this: a secret order of warrior monks, feared and respected across Europe, suddenly erased from history overnight. A pair of royal children vanish into the stone silence of the Tower of London. A strange book, written in an unknown language and filled with images of alien plants and celestial puzzles, refuses to give up its meaning to this very day. This isn't fantasy. This is history, and the deeper you look into it, the stranger it gets. Tonight, we dim the torches and wander down the darker, dustier hallways of the past to uncover the most chilling and confounding medieval mysteries that historians still argue over. These are not just stories, they're unsolved cases that challenge everything we think we know about the Middle Ages. So subscribe to my channel and get comfortable. Let the quiet settle in around you. Let the wind of time whisper in your ear. This is Whisper Hollow. And these are the medieval conspiracies that are still unsolved. Let's begin with the most iconic mystery of them all. A tale of gold, betrayal, and a conspiracy so vast, it still echoes in every modern whisper of secret societies. The Knights Templar. Founded in 1119 in the wake of the First Crusade, the Templars began as humble protectors of Christian pilgrims. But what started as a band of knights sworn to poverty and piety, quickly transformed into a continent-spanning force with unparalleled political, economic, and military reach. By the 13th century, the Knights Templar had become Europe's first international bankers. You could deposit money in Paris and withdraw it in Jerusalem. Their fortress-like commanderies dotted the map, from London to Acre. Their secrets were protected by strict hierarchy and vows of silence. And their power? Terrifying. Especially if you were a king in debt to them. The seeds of a set-up King Philip IV of France, nicknamed Philip the Fair, was desperate. His costly wars against England and Flanders had drained the royal coffers. His attempts to tax the clergy angered the Pope. And looming over all his problems? A massive debt to the Templars. But Philip had something more dangerous than an army. He had a cunning political mind. He realized that if he couldn't pay the Templars, perhaps he could destroy them instead. With careful planning, he began planting rumors. Whispers that the Templars were not what they seemed. That behind their monastic facade lay a cult steeped in heresy. They were accused of spitting on the cross, worshipping a demonic idol named Baphomet, engaging in obscene initiation rituals, and even denying the divinity of Christ. The charges were wild, almost theatrical, but Philip knew something the Templars didn't. People love a scandal, especially when it involves the powerful. Friday the 13th, 1307. It was a crisp October morning when Philip made his move. Across France, knights in royal livery pounded on monastery gates. Templar after Templar was seized in his bed, dragged from his chapel, arrested in silence. In all, hundreds were taken in one morning. Thus was born the superstition around Friday the 13th. Torture followed. Broken limbs, hot irons, sleep deprivation. Under unbearable agony, many knights confessed to the charges. But most later recanted. It didn't matter. A final flame 7 years later, on March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, was marched to a stake in the center of Paris. He had been imprisoned and tortured for years. As flames licked the pyre, he did something shocking. He cried out that the Templars were innocent, and that both Pope Clement V and King Philip would soon meet divine justice. Within a year, both were dead, the Pope of a heart attack, the King from a sudden illness. The prophecy fulfilled, or coincidence? The missing treasure. When the smoke cleared, the real mystery remained. Where did the Templar treasure go? Despite their wealth, very little was recovered. The official records show estates and titles were seized. But the gold, jewels, and sacred relics? Gone. Some say the Templars smuggled their wealth away to Scotland or Switzerland. Others claim ships left the port of La Rochelle days before the arrests, vanishing into legend. There are even stories of a hidden underground vault somewhere in France, sealed and waiting. The legend of the treasure has fueled everything from the founding of Switzerland's secret banks to tales of the Holy Grail. The lasting mystery: did the Templars really fall because of heresy? Or were they victims of the first state-sponsored smear campaign? Could they still exist today, reshaped into the Freemasons or Illuminati? Every few years, someone claims to have found new evidence: a carved stone, a coded manuscript, a buried chest. but nothing definitive has ever emerged. Their treasure, if it exists, remains lost. Their secrets, if they were real, remain locked away. And their legacy? Eternal. The Tower of London is a place soaked in secrets. Its walls have held queens, spies, revolutionaries, and traitors. Its stones have heard the final prayers of the condemned. But of all the shadowy tales that haunt this place, none have lingered longer or cut deeper than the disappearance of 2 royal children in the summer of 1483. This is the story of Edward V and Richard, Duke of York. The boys history remembers as the princes in the Tower, a kingdom in turmoil. The setting is England, still raw from the Wars of the Roses, a bloody tug-of-war between the houses of Lancaster and York for control of the throne. In 1483, King Edward IV of the House of York dies unexpectedly. His eldest son, Edward, is just 12 years old, too young to rule on his own. According to tradition, his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, steps in as Lord Protector. What follows is a spiral of events so fast and chilling that many believe it had to be orchestrated long before the king's body was even cold. A coronation interrupted. Young Edward was travelling to London to be crowned. He was met on the road by his uncle Richard, who said he would personally escort him to the capital, for his safety of course. But when Edward arrived, he wasn't taken to Westminster Abbey, he was taken to the Tower of London. Now at the time, the Tower wasn't just a prison, it was also a royal residence, often used to house monarchs before their coronations. So initially, this didn't raise alarm bells. That would change quickly. 2 boys, 1 tower. Soon after, Richard convinced the Queen Mother, Elizabeth Woodville, to release her second son, 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York, so he could join his brother in the Tower. She was hesitant. She'd taken sanctuary in Westminster Abbey, suspecting political danger, but Richard swore they'd be safe. With both boys now locked away, events moved at a frightening pace. A bishop declared their parents' marriage invalid, meaning the children were illegitimate and had no claim to the throne. Parliament confirmed it in a document known as Titulus Regius. Suddenly, the crown passed not to the boy in the Tower, but to his uncle. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was crowned King Richard III. Last sightings, for a short time the boys were still seen playing in the Tower gardens, watching the river through barred windows. A few guards and attendants reported small glimpses. A hand waved from a window. Laughter from the garden. Then, silence. By late summer they were gone. No announcement, no ceremony, no explanation. Just, gone. Theories and whispers. The leading theory is, of course, the simplest. Richard III had them murdered. Their existence was a threat to his rule. As long as they lived, enemies could rally behind their claim to the throne. But Richard never confessed. And despite ruling for 2 years, he never presented the boys publicly, alive or dead. If they had died of natural causes, wouldn't he have said so? Held a funeral? Laid the rumors to rest? This silence speaks volumes. Still, some historians argue other possibilities. Maybe they were smuggled out. Maybe they were poisoned slowly. Maybe someone else, an ambitious noble, or even the Duke of Buckingham, acted alone, hoping to earn Richard's favor or destabilize him. Others point to Henry Tudor, who would defeat Richard at the Battle of Bosworth and become Henry VII. If the boys were alive when he came to power, they would have been a threat to him too. Could he have ensured they were never found? The bones beneath the stairs in 1674, workmen remodeling the White Tower uncovered a wooden box buried beneath a staircase. Inside were the skeletal remains of 2 children. King Charles II ordered the bones to be interred at Westminster Abbey, believing they were the lost princes. A plaque still marks the tomb. But there's a problem. The bones were never properly examined. In the 20th century, a request to perform modern DNA testing was denied. To this day, the remains have not been conclusively identified. Are they the princes, or just a tragic coincidence? A pretender appears in 1490. A man calling himself Perkin Warbeck appeared in Europe, claiming to be Richard, Duke of York, the younger of the 2 missing princes. He was handsome, eloquent, educated, and he had support, from the Duchess of Burgundy's sister to Edward IV, who claimed he was her nephew, from nobles, even from King James IV of Scotland. He waged a campaign of legitimacy that rattled Henry VII deeply. Eventually captured and imprisoned, Warbeck was forced to confess and was executed. But to this day, some wonder, was he really a fraud? Or did the younger prince survive, only to be silenced decades later? Threads that lead nowhere. Other clues have surfaced over the centuries. A page in a Tudor-era chronicle describing a confession by James Tyrrell, an alleged murderer of the princes. But the evidence was weak and possibly politically motivated. Secret burial records that vanished from cathedral archives. Alleged sightings of a lost prince in Flanders, raised in secret under another name. But no proof. No confessions. No bodies that can speak. The fate of the princes in the Tower remains one of the most chilling royal conspiracies in history, both for its silence and for the innocence of the victims. Whisper hollow reflection. So close your eyes. Imagine the cold stone walls of the tower. 2 small beds, neatly made. The rustle of velvet robes, the flicker of candlelight. Footsteps echo in the night. And then, nothing. The world forgets, but the tower never does. Coming up next, a mysterious book written in an unbreakable code, filled with strange women, alien plants, and secrets no one has ever been able to read. But before we turn the page, take a deep breath. You are safe. You are here. And the shadows of the past can only whisper. They cannot reach you now. The Voynich manuscript in the quiet corners of the Yale University Library, locked away in a climate-controlled chamber, rests a book that has puzzled the world for more than 600 years. Its pages are filled with strange women bathing in green pools, astrological wheels turning without names, and plants that seem to belong to another world entirely. And then, there's the text, line after line of curling, looping letters that don't belong to any known language. It's written in something that no one, no linguist, no historian, no cryptographer, has ever been able to read. This is the Voynich manuscript. And it may just be the most impenetrable conspiracy the Middle Ages ever left behind. A book with no past. The book first entered modern history in 1912, when a Polish-American rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich purchased it from a Jesuit college in Italy. He knew immediately it was something special. The parchment pages were creamy and well-preserved. The illustrations were vibrant. The script, unlike anything he or anyone had ever seen. But when he tried to trace its origins, he ran into a wall of silence. No one knew who had written it, or when, or why. Modern carbon dating has helped us a little. The parchment was made between 1404 and 1438, placing it squarely in the heart of medieval Europe. But the ink, the pigments, the illustrations, still a mystery, the language of no language. The most astonishing part of the Voynich manuscript is the text itself. Written in an unknown script now nicknamed Voynichese, the language has never been deciphered. And that's saying something. Over the past century, some of the best minds in the world have tried. British and American cryptanalysts from World War II, NSA codebreakers, linguists, AI researchers, and even hobbyist sleuths with computer models, none have succeeded. Yet Voynichese follows rules. Words repeat in patterns that resemble real grammar. Letters cluster into syllables. Some pages are full of short words, others long. Some sections seem more poetic, others more technical. But the alphabet, completely unknown. It doesn't match Latin, Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, or any medieval dialect. There are no obvious roots, no similar shapes. It is, quite literally, a code without a key. The impossible plants interspersed between the blocks of text are illustrations, and this is where the mystery deepens. The first section of the manuscript is filled with botanical drawings. At first glance they look like medicinal plant diagrams. But none of the plants exist. Botanists have tried for decades to match the roots, leaves, and flowers to known species. Some plants look like distorted versions of real herbs, belladonna, arnica, henbane, but others seem to be complete fabrications. Are they real plants drawn from memory? Imaginings? Hybrids from a dream? Some believe these plants could be alchemical ingredients, symbolic representations of spiritual ideas, or coded healing recipes. Others think they're deliberately made up to disguise a secret meaning. The strange women turn the page, and the book grows even stranger. Nude women are drawn in elaborate bathing scenes, some standing in what appear to be communal tubs connected by pipes, others floating in green liquid that pours from ornate fountains. Some of the women wear crowns, others hold stars. One turns a celestial wheel. One seems to vanish into the petals of a flower. Are they goddesses? Patients? Priestesses? In medieval Europe, women were rarely depicted in manuscripts unless as saints or sinners. But these women seem different. Symbolic, serene, intentional. No names are written next to them, no saints, no titles. Just curves and spirals and symbols, unmoored from meaning. Celestial secrets. The middle of the manuscript is dominated by astrological diagrams. There are circular charts filled with unknown constellations, zodiac wheels, lunar cycles, stars drawn in careful spirals. Months are labeled, but not in Latin or any known medieval calendar. Some pages contain long strings of symbols woven into the arms of starbursts. Were these charts used for healing or spell work? Did they mark fertility cycles or astrological events? Were they meant for summoning or simply observation? We don't know. Even the zodiac signs are confusing. Capricorn is drawn as a goatfish hybrid, Pisces as twin fish circling a wheel. But other signs are missing altogether, or replaced with unknown glyphs. A medieval encyclopedia of something. Some researchers believe the Voynich manuscript may be a kind of encyclopedia, written for or by an unknown female medical practitioner in a remote region of Europe. Medieval midwives and herbalists often had to disguise their knowledge to avoid persecution. A coded book filled with herbal remedies, celestial knowledge and anatomical diagrams might have been a way to pass down dangerous wisdom in secret. Others believe it was meant as a grimoire, a magical text filled with rituals, symbols, and sacred geometry. The manuscript could be a spiritual tool, written in a symbolic language accessible only to initiates of a forgotten order. Some argue it was created for a royal patron in an imaginary language, perhaps to amuse, entertain, or protect the patron's private secrets. Or maybe it's something even stranger, the hoax theory. There is one theory that refuses to go away, that the Voynich manuscript is an elaborate hoax. The 15th century was an age of mystics and alchemists, many of whom made good money selling secrets. Could this book have been created by a clever conman hoping to impress a gullible noble or rich collector? The sheer effort it would take is staggering. The manuscript contains over 170,000 characters, none repeated exactly. The language follows natural linguistic entropy, something even modern AI struggles to fake. The illustrations are too consistent to be done at random. If it was a hoax, it was a brilliant one, crafted not just to trick, but to endure. And yet, why? Why put years into a book no one could read, unless the author believed it truly meant something? Alien origins. And yes, some theories stretch beyond the stars. Could the book have been dictated by aliens, written in a non-human language using an alien logic? It sounds wild, but in the 1960s, the theory gained traction among fringe historians and UFO researchers who believed the book's botanical forms resembled life not found on Earth. Or could the manuscript be a channeled text, like automatic writing, where a scribe records messages from divine or otherworldly sources? If so, the Voynich manuscript may not be coded at all. It may be transcribed thought, written in a language that only existed in one mind, at one time. A box without a key. The truth is, we don't know. Every year new experts try their hand. AI models analyze syntax, multilingual linguists test hypotheses. Mathematicians break down letter frequencies. Yet the Voynich manuscript remains a locked box with no key. Even its name is a riddle, named not after its author, but after the man who found it. And that may be the most tantalizing thing of all. Because in this book, this one-of-a-kind object tucked away on a shelf, there is a message. A story, a truth. We just can't read it. Whisper hollow reflection, so close your eyes. Imagine the soft rustle of ancient pages. The ink drying under candlelight. A scribe hunched in silence, transcribing knowledge they believed was too powerful to be understood by ordinary minds. And now, 6 centuries later, that same silence wraps the book like a shroud, a language that no one speaks, a puzzle that may never be solved. And perhaps, that's the point. Coming up next, the bizarre medieval trial of a dead pope, a scandal that shook the church to its bones, and a courtroom unlike any the world has ever seen. But for now, let the mystery rest. You are safe, you are still, and history can wait until morning. The Cadaver Synod. If you were walking through Rome on a grey winter morning in the year 897, you might have caught sight of an unusual procession. Down the stone streets came a cart, silent, slow, and escorted by grim-faced clergy. Atop it sat a corpse, dressed in full papal regalia, crowned, robed. Propped up carefully like a grotesque puppet, he was going to court. And in front of a shocked and bewildered audience, his bones were put on trial. This was the Cadaver Synod, and it remains one of the strangest and most chilling conspiracies of the Middle Ages. The dead pope. The man in the robes was Pope Formosus. During his lifetime, Formosus had been a controversial figure. He was a skilled diplomat and an intelligent leader, but also a political survivor in one of the most corrupt and violent periods of papal history. Rome in the 9th century was a battlefield. Noble families vied for power, and the papacy was caught in the crossfire. Kings installed popes, and popes excommunicated kings. Backstabbing, bribes, and assassinations were all just another day at the office. Formosus had made enemies, powerful ones. He'd excommunicated other bishops, shifted alliances, and ultimately supported the crowning of Charles the Bald as Holy Roman Emperor. Then later, he changed sides again to crown Arnulf of Carinthia. In a world of shifting loyalty, this proved fatal. The trial begins. After Formosus died in 896, his successor, Pope Stephen VI, launched a brutal campaign to destroy his legacy. But Stephen didn't just denounce Formosus, he went further. Far further. He had Formosus's corpse exhumed from its tomb in St. Peter's Basilica. After lying buried for nearly 9 months, the body was in advanced decay. It was cleaned up, dressed in sacred vestments, and placed on a throne in the papal courtroom. There, in the solemn silence of the Lateran Basilica, Pope Stephen convened a full ecclesiastical trial. A trial of a dead man. A puppet and a prosecutor. Formosus's body did not sit in silence alone. Beside him, a deacon was appointed to speak on his behalf. His job was to answer questions, refute accusations, and defend the lifeless pope as if he were alive. It was a macabre performance. Stephen, acting as both judge and prosecutor, shouted accusations at the corpse. That Formosus had violated canon law by becoming pope while still a bishop of another region, that he had aspired to the papacy illegally, that he had perjured himself, and served under false pretenses. The deacon trembled, the body sagged, the crowd gasped, but the judgment was never in doubt. The sentence: Formosus was declared guilty, and the punishment? Drenched in symbolism and hatred. All of Formosus's acts as pope were declared null and void. His election was retroactively invalidated. His papal garments were stripped from the corpse, the 3 fingers used in blessings were cut off. His body was dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber River. The church tried to erase him, spiritually and physically. The backlash. But the river did not keep the body. Legend says the corpse was recovered by a monk and reburied in secret. And from that point forward, everything turned against Stephen VI. Rome erupted in outrage. The people were horrified. Even in a time of bloody politics, this was too far. The image of a pope, desecrating his predecessor's corpse, shattered the credibility of the church. Stephen was imprisoned, and not long after he was strangled to death in his cell. Justice, some whispered, had come for the living. Formosus's legacy, Pope Formosus, once condemned and mutilated, was quietly reburied with honors by a later pope. His name was slowly restored, his acts reinstated, but the scandal of the Cadaver Synod remained. Over the next few decades, the papacy tried to pretend it never happened. Some popes burned the records. Others re-condemned Formosus, only to later reverse their decisions again. The cycle continued. A 9th century version of revisionist history. Only this time, it was about an actual corpse. The unsolved questions. Why did Stephen go to such extremes? The most common theory is political revenge. Stephen was a protégé of a rival faction, one that hated Formosus's shifting allegiances. By condemning him, Stephen could rewrite church history and consolidate power. Others believe Stephen was mentally unstable. Contemporary reports describe him as paranoid and delusional. Some chroniclers suggest he was manipulated by others, a puppet used by even more shadowy figures in the Roman nobility, but no one can fully explain the theatrical horror of the Cadaver Synod. Why a full trial? Why the symbolic desecration? Why the 3 fingers? It's as if someone wanted not just to discredit Formosus, but to send a spiritual message, that his very soul had been rejected. Whisper hollow reflection, so close your eyes. Picture the dim light of the basilica, the flicker of torches, the stink of decay, the silence of the corpse, and the booming voice of Stephen, yelling accusations into the void. A trial not for justice, but for revenge. A corpse dressed as a pope, judged in death, condemned by the living. And through it all, the slow tolling of church bells, counting out a moment in history so strange, so surreal, that it still sends chills centuries later. The Dancing Plague of 1518. Most medieval conspiracies involve power, betrayal, or secrecy. But once in a while, something slips into the history books that seems impossible to explain. because it doesn't fit into any known category of logic or motive. It begins not with a whisper, but with a footstep, then another, and another, until an entire city was swept up in a frenzy that no one could stop, no one could explain, and no one would ever forget. This is the story of the dancing plague of 1518, and to this day, it remains one of the strangest mass events ever recorded. Strasbourg, July 1518. The summer heat clung to the stone streets of Strasbourg, a prosperous city in the Holy Roman Empire, nestled along the Rhine River. The people were weary. Plague outbreaks, grain shortages and harsh taxes had pushed many into quiet despair, but on one ordinary morning, something extraordinary happened. A woman named Frau Trofea stepped into the street and started to dance. There was no music, no festival, just her, swaying, spinning, silently, obsessively. At first, neighbors chuckled. Perhaps it was a joke, a moment of madness. But the next day, she was still dancing. And the next. By the end of the week, more than 30 people had joined her. By the end of the month, over 400 people were dancing. Day and night. Without rest. Without reason. A city in panic. Eyewitnesses described the dancers as trapped in their own bodies, their feet moving without pause, their faces twisted in exhaustion and fear. Some screamed for help as they twirled uncontrollably. Others begged for death to come. Doctors were called. Clergy performed exorcisms. Nothing worked. The strangest part? Many of the dancers were otherwise healthy. Some danced for days, collapsing only to rise again. Others bled from their feet, foaming at the mouth. A few even died, of heart attacks, strokes, or sheer exhaustion. The city was desperate for answers. Theories of the time. In 1518, medicine was a strange mix of ancient Greek theory, superstition, and local custom. The prevailing medical explanation was hot blood, an excess of internal heat that had to be burned off through movement. So the authorities tried a surprising solution. They encouraged the dancing. Yes, they actually built a stage, brought in musicians, and cleared public halls to give the dancers space to work through their fever. It made things worse. The number of dancers doubled, then tripled, and the deaths began to climb. Was it demonic? Many in the church believed the plague was a form of divine punishment. The region had been through years of turmoil, famine, floods, and rumors of sin among the nobility. Some believed Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, had cursed the town. Groups of pilgrims were organized. Dancers were taken to shrines in the Vosges Mountains, where their shoes were removed, and they were placed before relics, praying for release. Some stopped dancing, others did not. A case of mass hysteria. Centuries later, modern psychologists and historians returned to the case and offered a chilling possibility: mass psychogenic illness, what we might now call mass hysteria. In this theory, the extreme stress of living under plague, poverty, and religious fear may have triggered a collective psychological break, manifesting physically as uncontrollable movement. The body acts out what the mind cannot contain. In a society where emotions were repressed and spiritual terror was constant, perhaps dance became an escape, and then, a prison. Was it poison? Another theory is far more literal: ergot poisoning. Ergot is a mold that grows on damp rye. It produces alkaloids that are chemically similar to LSD. If the city's grain supply had been tainted, it could have caused hallucinations, convulsions, and spasms, some eerily similar to dancing. But critics point out that ergot poisoning usually causes people to convulse, not move rhythmically. And it often leads to paralysis or death, not prolonged, patterned movement. There's also no evidence that animals or children were affected at the same time. So the poison theory, like the rest, remains unproven. Social confinement, spiritual desperation. The deeper mystery may lie in the social fabric of the time. 1518 was a pressure cooker. Peasants were heavily taxed. Religion was deeply punitive. The Black Death had returned again and again. People lived with a near-constant fear that they were being watched by God and judged. In that context, the dancing plague may have been a cry for help, one that spread like fire in a dry forest. If one woman's body broke under the pressure, others may have unconsciously followed, mirroring the movement, surrendering to the same invisible rhythm. It was a kind of emotional contagion, a community screaming without words, the end of the plague. By early September, the dancing finally stopped. The city, bruised and confused, buried its dead. The stages were torn down, the music silenced. No one could say exactly why it ended, just that it did. And then, like the spell of a dream, Strasbourg returned to normal. The city never fully explained it. Chroniclers wrote of it with hushed tones. Some blamed witches. Others blamed the air, or the stars. But no clear answer ever came. Did it really happen? The evidence for the dancing plague is surprisingly solid. It's recorded in multiple chronicles by reputable sources: city physicians, abbots, town clerks. The archives of Strasbourg's council list real expenses for stages and musicians, verifying that the city believed it was dealing with a real crisis. In other words, this wasn't rumor, it wasn't legend, it happened. Whisper hollow reflection. So close your eyes. Picture the cobblestone streets, hot beneath the midsummer sun. A woman, alone at first, begins to sway. The townspeople pause. A second dancer joins. Then a third. 100 feet shuffle in unison. There is no music. Only the sound of shoes against stone. And the pulse of something no one can explain. What made them dance? What made them stop? We may never know. But in the silence that follows, the mystery still echoes. The Green Children of Woolpit. There are many kinds of mysteries in the Middle Ages. Conspiracies, betrayals, vanishing treasures. But then there are those stories that defy categorization altogether. Stories that make you question where the boundaries of history truly lie. This one comes to us not from a castle or a battlefield, but from a quiet English village, surrounded by fields, with little more than a church and a handful of stone cottages. It begins with the sudden appearance of two children. Their clothes were unfamiliar, their speech was unintelligible, and their skin was green. This is the mystery of the Green Children of Woolpit, and to this day, no one knows where they came from. The village of Woolpit. The setting is the county of Suffolk, in eastern England. The year is sometime in the 12th century, most likely during the reign of King Stephen, around the 1150s, though some place the story later, during King Henry II's time. Woolpit was a small farming village, its name derived from the wolf pits used to trap predators that threatened livestock. Life here was simple, slow, and devout, which is why the arrival of two strange children near one of those very wolf pits would become legend. The children emerge according to two chroniclers, William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall. The children were discovered by reapers working the fields. They appeared near one of the wolf pits, seemingly disoriented, frightened and confused. They were a young boy and girl, holding hands. Their skin was described as having a greenish hue, like a pale shade of spring grass. They spoke no recognizable language. Their clothing was made from an unknown fabric, unlike anything seen in the region. They refused all food except raw green beans, which they ate ravenously. The villagers were stunned. Adoption and change. The children were taken in by a local landowner, Sir Richard de Culm, who tried to care for them. Over time they began to learn English and adapt to village life. But then, tragedy struck. The boy fell ill and died. Within a few months of arriving, his condition had always been weaker, and some said he was never quite able to adjust to his new surroundings. The girl, however, survived. And as she grew older and learned to speak the language of the villagers, she began to explain what she remembered. And her story only deepened the mystery. A place without sunlight. The girl claimed she and her brother had come from a place called St. Martin's Land. According to her, it was a world of twilight, where the sun never fully shone, and everything had a greenish cast, just like them. She said the people there were all green-skinned, and that the land was separated from ours by a great river. One day, she and her brother had followed a path of light into a cave, and after wandering for what felt like a long time, they emerged in Woolpit. When they turned back, the path was gone, and they were trapped in a world they did not understand. What could it mean? The story has fascinated researchers for centuries. Some dismiss it as folklore, a cautionary tale, or village legend. But the fact that two separate chroniclers, both respected historians of their time, recorded it lends the tale unusual credibility. And the green skin? Not easily explained. Medical theories. Some modern historians and scientists have speculated that the children may have been suffering from a condition called hyperchromic anemia, or possibly chlorosis, a form of iron deficiency that, in extreme cases, gives the skin a faint green tint. If the children had been malnourished and kept underground, out of the sun, This might have contributed to their odd appearance. Others suggest arsenic poisoning from contaminated water sources, or even a rare genetic disorder that affected both siblings. But these are just guesses. They don't explain the strange language, the odd clothing, or the story of St. Martin's Land. Were they foreigners? Some believe the children were Flemish refugees, orphaned by war, and wandering from village to village. In that case, their language may have simply been misunderstood dialect, their clothing foreign, and their skin tone exaggerated by trauma or illness. But even this theory has flaws. There is no record of Flemish-speaking villages near Woolpit at the time. And why would children claim to have come from an underground land of perpetual twilight? It doesn't add up. Otherworldly explanations. Folklorists point to the possibility that this is a preserved fairy tale, not in the sense of fiction, but as a literal account of interdimensional travel from a realm parallel to our own. In Celtic and English mythology, stories abound of the Fae, beings who live in underground lands, are disoriented by the mortal world, and often appear pale or green. Some even emerge through caves or tunnels, never to return. Could the green children be survivors of such a crossing? There's also the UFO theory. Some fringe researchers have interpreted the children's tale as a description of alien abduction or interplanetary travel, the Twilight Land being a different world entirely, glimpsed through a portal or wormhole. Unlikely? Yes. But no less strange than the original story. A story that loops. What makes the mystery of the green children so powerful is that it sits at the crossroads of fact and folklore. There's no motive, no crime, no conspiracy. Just two children who shouldn't have existed, appearing in a place that couldn't explain them. The girl, it's said, eventually grew up and married a man from nearby King's Lynn. She became part of society. Her skin returned to a normal tone. But her story, her origin, was never forgotten. The chronicle remains. William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall both recorded the story decades later. But neither treated it as fiction. They documented it as fact. Mysterious, yes, but not dismissed. Even centuries later, the story continues to appear in folklore, literature, and modern paranormal studies. Because it defies classification. And those are the stories that last the longest. Whisper Hollow reflection. So close your eyes. Imagine a field at the edge of a village, the low hum of summer, the rustle of wheat in the breeze. And then, a stir of movement near the wolf pit. Two small figures emerge, eyes wide, clothes strange, skin tinted green by a sun that doesn't shine here. They do not speak your language. And yet, they are just children. Where did they come from? Why did one survive? And what happens to the doorway they slipped through, when no one is watching? The strange fate of Edward II. Some kings rule with iron fists. Some rule through cunning. And some, like Edward II of England, seem to stumble through history, undone not just by their enemies, but by the people closest to them. His reign was marked by scandal. His fall was swift, and his death may not have happened at all. This is the mystery of the king who was supposed to be dead, but whose ghost may have walked in secret long after the bells tolled for him. The rise of a doomed king, Edward II, was born in 1284, the son of the formidable Edward I, also known as Longshanks. While his father was a seasoned warrior and ruthless ruler, Edward II was different. He preferred music over military drills, the company of favorites over noblemen, and beautiful court ceremonies over battlefields. When his father died in 1307, Edward inherited the throne. But from the beginning, he made enemies. His closest companion, Piers Gaveston, was hated by the nobility. Gaveston was charismatic, flamboyant, and treated as the de facto ruler, granted titles, gifts and power. Many believed Edward and Piers were more than just friends. Whether romantic or not, their relationship was viewed as a threat. In 1312, a group of barons captured Gaveston and executed him without trial. Edward never forgave them. And the seeds of his downfall were sown. The Queen and the betrayal. Edward eventually married Isabella of France, daughter of the French king. She was young, beautiful and politically astute. But the marriage quickly soured. Edward had found a new favorite, Hugh Despenser the Younger. And just like Gaveston, Despenser rose quickly in power, showered with titles and royal favor. Once again the nobility seethed. This time the backlash was brutal. By 1326, Queen Isabella had had enough. She fled to France, took a lover, Roger Mortimer, a powerful English exile, and began plotting Edward's removal. She returned to England with a small army. Towns welcomed her. Nobles defected. Edward, abandoned and desperate, fled with Despenser, but was eventually captured. The fall of a king, Hugh Despenser was hanged, drawn and quartered, in a spectacle meant to erase him from memory. Edward was imprisoned. But here's where the mystery begins. Most chronicles agree that Edward II died at Berkeley Castle in 1327. But the details are chilling and strange. One rumor, the most famous, claims he was murdered with a red-hot poker inserted into his body to leave no visible wounds. The method, some say, was meant to preserve the illusion of natural death while punishing him in the most humiliating way possible. But there's no contemporary account of such a death. In fact, there's no official autopsy, no public body, no concrete proof that he died at all. Only whispers. The Fieschi letter, in the 1330s, a letter surfaced, written by an Italian monk named Manuele Fieschi, a papal notary. It was addressed to Edward III, Edward II's son and reigning king. The letter claimed that Edward II had escaped from Berkeley Castle with the help of a sympathetic jailer, travelled through Europe disguised as a pilgrim, and lived for years in monasteries in Germany and Italy. The letter detailed specific events and locations, many of which matched known facts. It even described a clandestine meeting between the former king and an English knight. Edward III reportedly kept the letter but never confirmed its truth. A hermit in Italy? Some accounts place Edward II at the monastery of Sant'Alberto di Butrio in northern Italy, living as a hermit under the protection of local nobles. The abbot of the monastery even recorded hosting a foreign former king around that time, whose story matched Edward's. Could the disgraced king have spent his final years quietly among monks, unseen, unheard but alive? The body in the abbey Edward II was officially buried at Gloucester Abbey, in a lavish tomb visited by pilgrims. But there's a problem. When the tomb was opened centuries later, the body inside was badly decomposed, but oddly preserved, wrapped in layers of cloth. No signs of trauma were noted. No branding, wounds or broken bones. Some scholars believe the body may not have been Edward's at all. Could it have been a substitute, used to fake the death? If so, who was it? And how many people would need to be complicit in hiding the truth? Why lie? If Edward lived, why wouldn't he return? The answer may lie in politics. His son Edward III had just come to power by deposing his own mother and her lover Mortimer. A return by Edward II would destabilize the kingdom and raise dangerous questions of legitimacy. Allowing his father to live in exile, quietly, may have been the safest option for all. A secret peace, sealed in silence. The legend that wouldn't die. The idea of Edward II's survival gripped the medieval imagination. He became a figure of hidden royalty, a wandering king cloaked in mystery. Ballads were written. Pilgrimages were made. And in later centuries his story inspired Shakespeare and romantic novelists alike. But the truth? Still buried, perhaps in a German monastery. Perhaps in a grave that doesn't belong to him. Or perhaps in plain sight, beneath a tomb that was always a monument to what people needed to believe, not what actually happened. Whisper hollow reflection, so close your eyes. Imagine the stone halls of Berkeley Castle, heavy with betrayal, a king in chains, a whisper in the dark, and a door left unlocked, just once. Now imagine a cloaked figure walking the hills of northern Italy, head bowed, silent. A man with no crown, no throne, but very much alive. What if death was just a convenient lie, and the truth slipped out with the morning fog? A world wrapped in secrets. We've traveled a long and winding path tonight, through war-torn kingdoms and darkened abbeys, past haunted towers, hidden books, and royal graves that may not hold who they claim. What began with the fiery fall of the Knights Templar led us into chambers of betrayal, towers that swallowed children whole, and cathedrals that put dead men on trial. We've decoded the undecipherable, danced until collapse and emerged blinking from strange lands where the sun never shines and the children speak no known tongue. Each mystery leaves us with a question, and none with a perfect answer. Why do these stories still hold us? Because in every one of them, something is missing. A final piece, a confirmed detail. A body, a confession, a key. And maybe that's the real allure of medieval conspiracies. They live on precisely because they refuse to resolve. They challenge our modern desire for certainty, for clean endings and closed cases. History, we're taught, is a record of what happened. But in truth, it's also a record of what we don't know. The gaps between the facts. What happened to the Templar treasure? Did Richard III really kill his nephews? What language is the Voynich manuscript written in? Why did an entire town dance itself to death? Who were the Green Children? Did Edward II survive? And what else is hidden in monasteries, buried under ruins, or waiting silently in library vaults that no one has opened in centuries? These aren't just stories. They're echoes, clues, invitations to dig deeper. And every time we revisit them, we write our own part of the conspiracy, simply by asking, what if? Whisper hollow reflection. So now, let your thoughts soften. The torches are burned low, the parchment is closed, the candle wax pools beside forgotten books. The stone halls are empty again, the footsteps have faded, the whispers are still. But somewhere, deep in a forgotten crypt, in a hidden monastery, beneath the roots of a quiet tree, there may yet be another piece of the puzzle. Waiting, watching, sleeping, crescent moon, you are safe here. And now it's your time to rest. Breathe in the silence of centuries. Let your thoughts drift like parchment on the wind. You are safe. You are still. The questions can wait. The stories will be here in the morning. And who knows? Perhaps one night, while half dreaming, you'll find yourself walking down the corridors of Whisper Hollow again, following the echo of a story that was never meant to end. Good night.